So before we go to NFTs, we'll talk about the topic of herd mentality, and this is affecting specifically the NFT space today. A lot of people will look at OpenSea and the numbers they are promoting that you see up here. These numbers are largely derived from wash trading. Anywhere between 50 to 75% of the volume that they're seeing here is really wash trading, like an NFT being sold from one hand to the other, and the other being actually the same individual to pump up the base price. So what we've seen over time, and we actually created our first NFTs back in April 2018. You can see the ramp up in price. What you don't see much though is then the actual use cases that I'm going to talk about, but you see other entities in the real world already jumping on the same hype, like Christie's starting to auction off NFTs at tremendous prices. But then the topics that I, as a technology investor, find a lot more interesting is looking at existing systems like supply chains and how NFTs can affect supply chains. So this is how supply chain works in very, very simplified terms today. I'm thinking about creating a product or solution. I may borrow some money, and then I may plant some grapes, and then I start bottling these grapes. Once they ripe, I start creating entries, how many bottles I have, and I start juggling those entries on the supply chain throughout my distribution network. It's gonna get shipped, and then eventually someone at the store picks it up and gets that bottle. What they don't get is the entry for the databases that this record was in. And as a side note, it's estimated that close to 50% of data that's stored in these databases in the supply chain context today are simply wrong. And the whole supply chain management market as a TAM stands at about $18 billion at the moment. So there's a lot more interesting solutions to be had. So we made this example already 4 years ago in our local webinars and our local meetups here. So if you think about a product in the future, you think about creating an entry as an NFT for that product on a blockchain first, and we're using our previous example of grapes. So if and when and where I hand over the product, then I also hand over that NFT, and you see the different blockchain-based solutions that are recording this record and then hopefully attaching the metadata to that NFT, i.e. was this particular product handled on the supply chain in a way conducive to the state of that product that I wanted to buy? Was it exposed to a lot of heat, a lot of cold? And at the point of sale, what I'm hoping to see, and what we've been asking for the past 4 years, is that I get my NFT from a real world physical product with all that metadata that this NFT accumulated. So think about this more from the perspective of actual composable tokens. So then who are the losers? Well, the losers that we can already predict with some degree of certainties are things like streaming service or other centralized middlemen, but there's a lot of winners that could be seen in that space. And every time you see a paper solution, my typical example is your dry cleaner, you should think about how this particular implementation should actually become an NFT that you can own, and that shows you either the history, the provenance, and or relies ownership of this real world item to you in reliable digital form. And then needless to say, it would solve most of the data insecurity that exists currently in the supply chain. And an obvious example, we wrote a longer white paper about that you will find on Hacker Noon, is the example of a car manufacturer. Right now, if there's a defective item identified in more than one car, then all of these models will be recalled, and a lot of times that ends up in multi-million-dollar damages to that car company that has to recall all of these models to check if that particular item that was implemented in that car is actually defective. And if and when and where you have all of these supply chain physical items with an accompanying digital clone on a blockchain, you could simply then recall all the items that are specifically affected by that particular supplier and or this particular batch, i.e. you can think of this from the perspective of a roll of sheet metal that produced 100 doors for a particular type of car. You would just recall the 100 cars rather than the entire collection of these.